You can't remember the last time you laughed without immediately feeling embarrassed, without that voice in your head telling you to calm down, to stop being so much, to remember you're an adult now, and adults don't get that excited about things, and somewhere along the way between childhood and now you learned that joy is something to be ashamed of, that enthusiasm is childish, that letting yourself fully experience pleasure or silliness or spontaneity is somehow inappropriate, somehow weak, somehow a sign that you're not taking life seriously enough. And so you walk through the world with this heavy seriousness, this constant performance of being put together and mature and above frivolous things, and it's exhausting. It's so exhausting to police yourself this way, to constantly monitor your reactions to make sure you're not being too much or too excited or too alive, and the worst part is that you don't even know when it started, when fun became something that feels dangerous instead of delightful, when you started viewing your own joy with contempt instead of celebration, when the voice that tells you to be serious stopped being your parents' voice and became your own. You watch other people dance or sing or play, and you feel this complicated mixture of longing and disgust. Longing because some part of you remembers what it felt like to move your body without self-consciousness, to make noise without worrying about being judged, to be fully immersed in the moment, without that observer in your head critiquing every expression. And disgust because they look ridiculous, they look childish. They look like they don't understand that life is serious business and there's no time for this kind of silliness when there are responsibilities and problems and the weight of being a functional adult. You can't let go, can't be spontaneous, can't do anything without first calculating whether it's appropriate, whether people will judge you, whether it serves a purpose beyond just feeling good. And feeling good has stopped being a good enough reason to do anything because somewhere you learned that pleasure without productivity is selfish, that joy without justification is immature, that the only valid emotions are the serious ones, the productive ones, the ones that don't make you look foolish or vulnerable or like you've forgotten that the world is hard and cruel and doesn't care about your happiness. You feel embarrassed when you get excited about something small. When you catch yourself about to share enthusiasm about a movie or a song or a hobby, and you immediately shut it down, minimize it, make a self-deprecating joke about how stupid it is to care this much about something so trivial. Because caring deeply about things that bring you joy feels dangerous, feels like giving people ammunition to hurt you, feels like admitting you have needs and desires beyond just surviving. And surviving is safe. Surviving is controllable. Surviving doesn't require you to be vulnerable or open or willing to look silly. But joy requires all of those things. Joy requires you to lower your guard and let yourself be seen in a state that isn't carefully controlled. And that feels more terrifying than continuing to live in this gray half-life where you're safe but you're also slowly dying inside. You don't know how to play anymore, literally don't remember how to engage in an activity just for the sake of enjoying it, without turning it into work, without giving yourself rules and goals and metrics for success. And when you try to do something fun, it feels forced, feels fake, feels like you're performing fun rather than experiencing it. And after about 5 minutes, that voice kicks in telling you this is stupid, telling you there are better uses of your time, telling you to stop acting like a child and go do something productive, something that matters, something that proves you're a serious person with a serious life who doesn't waste time on frivolous pursuits. You mock yourself before anyone else can mock you. You shut down your own enthusiasm as a preemptive strike against the judgment you assume is coming. You've become your own worst critic, your own joy killer. And you've convinced yourself this is maturity when really it's just self-abandonment. It's just you treating yourself the way someone once treated you. Internalizing their contempt for your aliveness and directing it inward until you don't need them to shut you down anymore because you do it automatically. You feel guilt when you're enjoying yourself. Immediate crushing guilt that tells you you're being selfish, that you should be doing something useful, that there are people suffering in the world, and you're over here laughing like an idiot without a care. And the guilt is so automatic, so visceral, that you can't even track where it comes from anymore. It's just there, embedded in your nervous system like a reflex, and so you sabotage your own joy before it can fully bloom. You cut it off at the roots because letting yourself feel good feels morally wrong, somehow feels like you're betraying some unspoken contract you made to be serious and responsible, and above the shallow pleasures that other people indulge in without this crushing sense of shame. Here's what actually happened to kill your ability to experience joy without shame. And it's not because you're naturally serious or naturally mature or naturally above fun. It's because at some point in your development, probably early, your expressions of joy were met with dismissal or mockery or punishment. Someone told you to calm down when you were excited to be quiet, when you were loud. To stop being so dramatic when you were just being a kid, experiencing emotions at their natural intensity, and you learned the way children learn everything through repetition and consequence, that your joy was too much, was annoying, was inappropriate, was something that needed to be controlled and contained and eventually eliminated if you wanted to be accepted, if you wanted to be safe, if you wanted to avoid the rejection or ridicule or anger that came when you let yourself be fully alive. Maybe your family was going through hard times and your happiness felt insensitive. Maybe your parents were depressed or stressed or just emotionally unavailable and your energy was overwhelming to them. Maybe you were punished for being loud or silly or spontaneous, or maybe you just absorbed the message from the world around you that serious people are valued and playful people are dismissed. That adulthood means killing off the parts of yourself that are light and free and unguarded. And so you killed those parts because that's what survival required, because being serious kept you safe, kept you accepted, kept you from being too much or too vulnerable or too open to attack. The brutal truth that will either break you open or keep you trapped, depending on whether you're ready to hear it, is this. Finding fun ridiculous isn't a personality trait. It's a trauma response. It's your nervous system protecting you from the vulnerability of joy by preemptively rejecting it, by making you disgusted by the very thing you're actually desperate for. And every time you mock yourself for getting excited, every time you shut down your own enthusiasm, every time you refuse to let yourself play or dance or be silly because it feels childish, you're not being mature. You're continuing a pattern of self-rejection that started when someone else rejected those parts of you, and you decided the safest thing to do was reject them first. Reject them harder. Reject them so thoroughly that you'd never have to risk feeling that pain of being too much, of being dismissed, of being told that your joy is annoying or inappropriate or something to be ashamed of. You learned that joy makes you vulnerable and vulnerability leads to pain. And so you armored yourself against joy, convinced yourself you're above it, that you don't need it, that people who chase happiness are naive or shallow, or haven't figured out yet that life is serious business. But really you're just terrified. Terrified of letting yourself want something as simple and human as the ability to laugh without immediately criticizing yourself, to play without turning it into productivity, to feel excited without shame flooding in to remind you that excitement is dangerous and seriousness is safety. So what do you do when you've spent decades training yourself out of joy? When playfulness feels foreign and frightening, when the idea of letting yourself have fun without purpose or productivity attached feels like falling off a cliff with no safety net. You start by acknowledging that the child who learned to suppress their joy didn't choose to become serious. They were taught to become serious. They were shown through repeated experience that their aliveness was too much, was unwelcome, was something to be controlled. And that child is still inside you, frozen at the age when they decided that safety meant stillness, when they chose survival over expression, when they learned that the price of belonging was the death of spontaneity. You give yourself permission to grieve what was taken from you, the years of joy you missed because you were too busy being appropriate, the experiences you avoided because they seemed childish, the relationships you kept at arm's length because letting people see you playful and unguarded felt too risky. And you acknowledge that this wasn't your fault. This wasn't you being naturally serious. This was you adapting to an environment that couldn't handle your full aliveness. You practice tiny acts of purposeless joy in private where no one can see you, and trigger that shame response. You dance in your room for 30 seconds even though it feels stupid. You sing in your car even though your voice isn't good. You color in a coloring book even though it serves no productive purpose. You do something purely because it feels good, purely because it makes you smile, purely because that child inside you is desperate for permission to exist again. And when the voice comes, the one that tells you this is ridiculous and you should stop wasting time, you acknowledge it, you thank it for trying to keep you safe. And then you keep going anyway. You keep dancing or singing or coloring or whatever small act of rebellion against your own seriousness you've chosen, because that voice is just fear, just the part of you that learned shame so well, it became automatic, and you're allowed to disobey it, allowed to choose differently, allowed to slowly, painfully, awkwardly teach yourself how to play again, even though you're decades behind, and it feels humiliating to be an adult who has to relearn what children know instinctively. You find one person, just one, who makes you feel safe enough to be silly around, who doesn't mock your enthusiasm, who matches your energy instead of dampening it, who gives you permission through their presence to lower your guard just slightly, and you practice being slightly more playful around them, slightly more expressive, slightly less controlled, and yes, it will feel vulnerable. Yes, it will feel like you're risking rejection, but the alternative is spending the rest of your life in this prison of seriousness, this self-imposed exile from joy. And that's not strength. That's not maturity. That's just slow death. That's just you honoring a trauma response as if it were a virtue. You give yourself permission to be ridiculous, to look foolish, to care deeply about things that don't matter, to get excited about small pleasures, to laugh too loud, to move your body without grace. to be enthusiastic without immediately undermining it with self-deprecation. And every time you do this, every time you choose expression over control, playfulness over performance, joy over judgment, you're not being childish, you're not being immature, you're reclaiming the parts of yourself that you had to abandon to survive. And that reclamation, that slow, painful process of learning to let yourself be light again, that's not weakness. That's the bravest thing you'll ever do. You find fun ridiculous because someone taught you that you were ridiculous when you were having fun. And you internalized that message so completely that you became the enforcer of your own joylessness. But you don't have to keep enforcing it. You don't have to keep choosing seriousness as protection. You don't have to keep treating your own aliveness with contempt just because someone else once did, and the child inside you, the one who learned to be still and quiet and serious to stay safe. That child is still there, still waiting, still hoping that one day you'll give them permission to play again, to laugh again, to be silly and spontaneous and fully alive again without shame, without apology, without the crushing weight of needing to justify your joy. And maybe today is that day. Maybe today is when you finally stop finding your own happiness ridiculous and start finding it revolutionary.